Assalamu alaikum, my dear students. In this video, we are going to introduce the next method by which we can repay debt, which is sinking fund method. Or what is meant of sinking fund? Different business entities like company may need amount of money at a specified future date to replace equipment, and the government may need amount of money at a specified future date to redeem outstanding bonds, and even a person may need amount of money at a specified future date to repay a loan. So the best practice for each one of these business entities is to set up a sinking fund. In sinking fund, each business entity can deposit equal periodic amount of payments in a fund to get interest or to earn interest on these deposits for achieving objective which is accumulate the required amount at maturity to fulfill the requirements, even to replace equipment or redeem bonds or repay loans or any other financial obligations. So the main objective of sinking fund is to accumulate required amount of money at a specified future date. So because we will deposit equal periodic amounts of payments to accumulate specific amount of money at the maturity date, so we can calculate the amount of payments using the equations of future value of anything. This amount of payments will grow or will earn interest rate over a specific period of time. So we can use the equation of future value of NAT to find the amount of payment by dividing future value of NAT, which is the amount required at specified future date, by the future value interest factor for NAT. As we said before, this factor can be obtained by two methods, either by calculating the equation or by using the table. So for any loan borrowed today, we have to repay the principal and pay interest. In the sinking fund method, we split or we do each transaction separately from the another. We have two transactions, one for paying the principal and one for paying the interest. In the sinking fund method, the borrower will pay periodic interest over the term of the loan, and at maturity he or she will repay the principal. So the value borrowed today will be repaid at maturity, the same value, and over time, over the term of the loan, the borrower will pay periodic interest. But repaying principal at maturity or after a specific number of years involves risk of inability to repay the full amount at maturity. So the best practice is to set up a sinking fund in which the borrower will pay or will deposit equal periodic amounts at specific interest rate to accumulate the principal of the loan. So repaying debt or repaying a loan involves two transactions: the periodic interest on the principal and the periodic deposits in the sinking fund. So periodic cost of debt consists of the periodic interest and the periodic deposits. Note that consumer loans cannot or usually don't use the sinking fund method in repaying the interest and the principal, but this method, sinking fund method, is more commonly used in government loans and long-term corporate loans. Let me show an example of a loan of 15,000 Egyptian pounds, and the interest payments are due every 3 months or at the end of each quarter at annual interest rate of 8%. So the principal is 15,000 Egyptian pounds, and the M refers to number of periods per year. Annual interest rate is 8%, but the quarterly interest rate will be 8/4 equals 2%, which means this borrower will pay 2% interest at the end of each quarter. The borrower will set up a sinking fund to pay back the 15,000 Egyptian pounds at the end of 6 years. So the number of years is 6 years, and the number of periods or number of quarters per year is 4. So the number of periods over the term period is 24 quarters. Actually, the borrower will get 4% interest on his deposits in the sinking fund. If we want to calculate the quarterly interest rate, we will divide the annual interest rate, which is 4, by 4, which is the number of quarters per year. So the quarterly interest rate on sinking fund deposits will be 1%. The required is find the quarterly debt expense or debt cost. This means we have to calculate the quarterly interest and the quarterly deposits in the sinking fund. So if we borrow 15,000 Egyptian pounds and we will repay quarterly interest payments calculated as 2% of the principal over the next 24 quarters. So the quarterly interest payment will be principal times the quarterly interest rate. Principal of 15,000 times quarterly interest rate of 2%, we have 300 Egyptian pounds as the interest. This means that the borrower will pay 300 Egyptian pounds at the end of each quarter over 24 periods or 24 quarters as interest on this principal. But at maturity, the borrower should repay the principal. So the borrower will set up a sinking fund to accumulate the required amount, which is the 15,000 Egyptian pounds. He or she will deposit equal quarterly payments to accumulate the future value of NAT or future value of 15,000 Egyptian pounds, and accumulate this amount at 1%. So we will use the equations to get or to obtain the amount of payments by dividing future value of NAT by the future value interest factor for NAT at 1% for 24 quarters. So we divide 15,000 over 26.79, which is a factor. So we will get 556 Egyptian pounds, which means at the end of each quarter, the investor or the borrower will deposit 556 Egyptian pounds to grow at 1% over 24 periods to get 15,000 Egyptian pounds that he will by which he or she will repay the principal. So at the end of each quarter, the borrower should have 856. This 856 should cover the periodic interest and the periodic deposits in the sinking fund. Summation of the interest payment and the the periodic deposits called debt cost or periodic debt cost. In other words, periodic debt cost is the summations of periodic interest payment and periodic deposits in the sinking fund. For this example, we know that we have two different types of interest rates associated with sinking fund loans. The first one is called lending rates paid by the borrower. In our case, it's 2%. Quarterly interest on the loan is 2%. And the second type of interest rate is savings rate earned by the borrower. In our case is 1%. Quarterly interest rate on the sinking fund is 1%, which means any payments paid or deposited by the borrower in the sinking fund will earn 1% over the term he or she agreed with the fund. In this example, we have a company called Sodic borrowed 10 million Egyptian pounds to pay interest annually at 12% and built up a sinking fund to repay the loan at the end of 9 years. So we have the value of the loan of 10 million Egyptian pounds, and the interest rate on this loan will be 12, and the number of years or the term of the loan is 9 years. The sinking fund accumulates at 7%. This means the sinking fund will give 7% interest on any deposits or on the deposits paid by the Sodic company. The required is to calculate how much is in the sinking fund at the end of 6 years. Okay, as we said before, the sinking fund has a main objective to accumulate the required amounts at maturity. So in our case, the main objective of Sodic is to accumulate 10 million after 9 years. So the Sodic will set up the sinking fund today, 2 deposits at the end of each year, certain amount of payment or certain amount of money to grow at 7% for 9 years to accumulate the amount required, which is 10 million Egyptian pounds. So first of all, we have to calculate the amount of payments Sodic will make at the end of each year by using the equation of future value of annuity, in which we divide future value of annuity by its factor at 7% for 9 years. So 10 million over 11.978, we will get 833 Egyptian pounds, which means at the end of each year, so the company will deposit 834,863 Egyptian pounds at the end of each year to grow at 7% for 9 years to accumulate 10 million and use these amounts to repay the loan. The required is to calculate how much these deposits be accumulated at the end of 6 years. So we will calculate the future value of this annuity after or at the end of 6 years by multiplying the amount of payments times the future value interest factor for annuity at 7% for 6 years. In other words, how much our deposits of 834,863 which made over the last 6 years, and each one has interest rate of 7% or can be could grow at 7%. So Sodic has 5,971,781 Egyptian pounds at the end of year 6. About borrower who has a $5,000 loan, and he agreed to pay interest semi-annually at annual interest rate of 10%, which will compounding semi-annually on this loan, and to build up a sinking fund which will repay the loan at the end of 5 years. The sinking fund accumulates at 4%. The required is how much the book value of this debt at the end of 4 years. We want to the outstanding balance of debt after 4 years. But we should adjust the interest rates of the sinking fund from annual to be semi-annually by dividing the annual interest rate over 2. Okay, in this exercise, this borrower will set up sinking fund to repay to have the required amount at maturity after 5 years. He want to have $5,000 to repay or to fully repay the principal. So he will deposit every 6 months specific amount of money to grow at 2%, which is the interest rate of or the interest rate on the sinking fund over the next 10 periods, because 5 years, but he will deposit twice in each year, so or every 6 months, so he will make 10 deposits over 10 periods to accumulate the required amount of $5,000. First of all, we have to calculate the amount of payments will be made at the end of each 6 months by using the equations of future value, in which we will divide the $5,000 by the future value interest factor for annuity at 2% for 10 periods, which is 10.95. So we have $456 should be made or should be deposited at the end of each or at the end of every 6 months over the next 10 periods to accumulate $5,000. Okay, the required is to calculate the book value of the debt at the end of year 4. At the end of year 4 means after 8 periods, because the deposits will be made every 6 months or semi-annually. So after 8 periods, we want to calculate the future value of all these deposits made by the borrower in the sinking fund, and which accumulated at 2%. So we will multiply the 456 times future value interest factor for annuity at 2% for 8 periods, because we want to calculate at the end of period 8. So this amount accumulated to be 3,919. In other words, the borrower paid or deposited 8 amounts of 456 over the previous 8 semi-annual periods, and each amount earns interest of 2%. So all these deposits accumulated to be 3,919 at the end of period 8 or after 4 years. So your money or the borrower has accumulated payments or accumulated value of his deposits of 3,919, but the principal or the original value of the loan is 5,000. So the remaining or the remaining value of this loan or the book value of this loan will be the difference between the original value of 5,000 and the accumulated value of his deposits of 3,919. So the book value of this debt will be 1,080 Egyptian pounds, or in our case in terms of dollars, so $1,080. So book value or outstanding balance of debt after 8 periods will be the original principal, in our case is 5,000, minus future value of the deposits in the sinking fund at the end of period 8. So 5,000 minus 3,919 equals $1,080, which is the book value of the debt. Suppose Salma borrows 10,000 Egyptian pounds for 10 years and uses a sinking fund to repay the principal. So the value of the loan is 10,000 and the number of periods is 10 years. And the sinking fund deposits earn annual interest rate of 5%. So this is an interest rate on the deposits in the sinking fund. So if the total required payment for both the interest and the sinking fund of deposits made at the end of each year is 1,445. This means that the annual cost of debt is 1,445. This means in this amount will cover the interest payment and the deposits in the sinking fund. Required is to calculate the annual interest rate charged on this loan. How much the interest rate charged on this loan. For that, the annual cost of debt equals the interest payment and the deposits, or the annual deposit in the sinking fund. The interest payment can be calculated by multiplying the principal and interest rate, while the deposits in the sinking fund calculated by dividing future value of annuity over future value interest factor for annuity. So we have the annual cost of debt of 1,445, and the principal is 10,000 times the interest rate which is required, plus the division of future value of annuity, which is 10,000, divided by the future value interest factor for annuity at 5% for 10 years will be 12.578. Okay, so the interest payment is 10,000 I plus 795. 795 is annual deposits in the sinking fund. We can transform this. We can transfer this amount to the left side. So we 1,445 less 795 equals 10,000 I. Rearrange the equations for finding value of I. So the annual interest rate equals the difference between the total cost, or the annual cost of debt, and the annual deposits in the sinking fund divided by the original value of the principal. So we have 0.065, which times 100. So the annual interest rate is 6.5%.